So we're at 5 o'clock. All right, welcome everyone. This is the ISUGD Senior Show Virtual Frontier webinar panel on social design. And we have Stephen and Tyler who are here to present their capstone projects. So the way this is going to work, if you haven't watched one of these yet, is Stephen and then Tyler will present their projects. And then after they've each presented, we'll have a discussion with questions and comments and things like that. So as the presentations are going along, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have anything that you'd like to say to either Stephen or Tyler, please feel free to just smash those into the text chat on YouTube, or you can put them into the text chat on Zoom. After they've both presented, anybody that's in Zoom is also more than welcome to unmute themselves or come on in video if you'd like to talk or if you'd like to chat. But yeah, throw those comments in there and then I'll inject them into the conversation at the end. So with that, let's get started. Stephen, if you want to share your screen, then we will turn our videos and our microphones off.
Sure thing.
The floor is yours.
So as said previously, my name is Stephen Klouw, and this is my project, Durable Future. Durable. Able to withstand wear, pressure, or damage. Hard wearing. Future. Something that will exist or happen in time to come. So, durable future. What does that mean? It's an idea that's been building in my head for quite some time, but only recently I've actually had the phrase to label it. For me, a durable future is one that has less trash and waste because of the products that we buy are well made and meant to last for quite some time. The best way that I was able to start and show this was to make something. So this is what my process of how I could see a durable future going. With this, I wanted to combine a few ways with how I actually did make things. This ended up being with my computer, my graphic design software, screen printing, and some woodworking, and also little bit of fire. For me, making something is about the final product, but also just as much about the process to actually get there. And the process sometimes can be quite frustrating. My design time on the computer happened pretty quickly, which allowed me to get a jump on the screen printing, which ended up being really beneficial for this process. It's definitely not my first rodeo with screen printing, but my emulsion the first time around really wanted to make it seem like it was. After the first round of screens not working out because of the bad emulsion, I immediately washed them out and got them prepped for a second round of emulsion. I decided to bring out a new container because that was what I thought was the biggest problem, was that the emulsion was too old. So I recoated the screens, laying them out to dry, and came back around for the second exposure try, which also didn't work. So I was back to the drawing board. With being back at the drawing board, I resorted to doing a whole new exposure test. So in my closet, I exposed parts of the screen little by little for a minute at a time to get the range of exposure times to pick from so that I could see which one would net me the best results. After doing the test, I decided to do what I would call a pre-wash before I actually went downstairs to the power washer, which turns out to be the crucial part that I was missing previously. It had been a step that I used to take before, and one that I did not think was super important, but it turns out that it was one of the more important steps for me to take with screen printing. So with the results of the exposure test, I had the information needed to make another new screen, and I finally got my third time around to work out as I needed it to. With that, I was able to get to printing. For the print itself, I had to make a little bit of a modification to my press, mainly adding some spacers for the hinges to sit on so that I could fit my board underneath the screen without damaging the screen. Once I got the print done, I had it dry for a few hours, and then it was time to start on the carving part of the project. This portion was when I could really start to enjoy the process of making this piece. There was a lot less of a defeat feeling when the screens weren't working, and a lot more of just enjoyment of working with the wood. Being able to just slowly work at the wood and shape it and see what was working or what I wanted to change. Working with the substrate that I chose and knowing that it was going to last a long time after I was done with it was really kind of a cool thing to think about while I was actually working on the project. And that enjoyment of just working on the wood too is, I feel like it's something that kind of everyone can feel and understand, knowing that you have just such a solid product, whatever it is, and that it'll last longer than you'll be around. However weird or scary that might be to think about, it's cool to know that what you're making or what you've purchased is there to stay, and you won't be needing to throw it out or change it anytime soon. And this thought is kind of the one that really is driving me forward with my goal of having a durable future. Shifting a little bit more of the focus onto the consumers to purchase well-made goods that will last for a long time is something that I'm fairly interested in, because for many times over we've seen that companies don't always like to do what's right or what's the best thing to do, and we can help guide them depending on how we make our purchases. And so that's, if we're making purchases for things that'll last longer, hopefully there's going to be that shift where more well-made things will be in the market and be produced. And if we're able to buy things that are going to last a while, we'll be doing our part to help the environment. And that's mainly because one of the bigger issues that we have right now with the environment is trash. The amount of disposable things that we use is just ending up everywhere around the world. And if we're able to still buy new things, but buy things that will not end up in a dump in a year, that would be quite a significant change. And even better, if you're buying something secondhand that would also keep it out of a dump, that's even better, because there's a lot of resources that go into making new materials and objects and things like that that we don't always think about. And so to go off of that, with the carving and stuff that I decided to do in my piece, I wanted to kind of symbolize that it would not be a perfectly smooth road ahead, and that, some creature comforts may have to be sacrificed in order to continue on with this vision that we can have. But overall, we'll have a beautiful future and we'll come out the better for it. The piece may be scorched with fire, but it's still there. It's going to last for a long time, and nothing's going to change that. And so while my making of this piece may be a little bit of a small gesture, I hope that more people will join in with the idea of us having a durable future. And I plan to do everything in my power to make sure that I'm also contributing. So yeah, there we go. As far as the rest of it, I mean, my video has pretty much covered everything that I like to say about the actual topic. And it's one of those things that like I had said, that it has just been in my head for a while, and it's something that even now I'm still kind of trying to make sure that I'm able to, I guess, talk about it as well as I can. But it's something that's going to be ever evolving.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Stephen.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So Tyler, you are up if you'd like to turn your video on and share your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, great presentation. So anybody that's watching on YouTube, feel free to drop comments in the text chat or questions. I'll introduce them into the discussion at the end. Same with folks on the Zoom. Feel free to drop questions in the text chat as you have them, and we'll get to them when we're finished. All right, you're up, Tyler.
All right. Well, as you said again, my name is Tyler Miller, and this is what I chose for my capstone project. There we go. So at the beginning of this school year, I guess it would have been this semester, when I got to my first capstone class, my professor gave us a project overview that was pretty much just, what is this capstone supposed to be? Because up to that point, we had spent the last 3.5 years knowing that this was coming, and knowing that it is supposed to be, as it says on screen, a concluding achievement. It's something that you've built up time towards, and you are showcasing everything that you've learned how to do. And we were all really excited about it. I was super excited about it. He broke it down into 3 phases that I'll go into as the presentation goes on. There's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and it breaks down different processes that should be done in the ideation and the design and creation of your capstone. A project description. I named my project the Identity Project. It's based off of a study that I did in 2018 for, I believe it was my sophomore studio, second semester with Heather Purdy. I did a similar project to the one that I did this semester, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But this is a documentary-based film study focused on highlighting a current world issue or a wicked problem. Wicked problem is just simply an issue that has no foreseeable solution. For instance, world hunger would be a wicked problem because there's no way for us at the current moment to make enough food to feed everyone in the world. So how do you go about solving a problem like that was something that my professor encouraged us to think about. It's a personal study about how the coronavirus pandemic has impacted the lives of individuals in different occupations and different circumstances. And the goal of it was to kind of personalize the issue and kind of describe the perspective or the magnitude of the problem on a large scale while also focusing on the details of the issue on a smaller scale. So for phase 1, the components for this were basically just brainstorming and ideation. This is the part where you focus on building this idea and developing this idea through criticism and talking with your peers and your professors to kind of find out what you want to do for your capstone. And in 2018, I did a project where I went to a homeless rehabilitation center and I interviewed some of the people that were going through that program. And I thought that would be, I had a ton of fun doing it the first time. And the answers that I got were really interesting. I think it would be cool to do something like that again. So I contacted, in early February, I started contacting people that I knew. Maybe it was through friends of mine or people that I just known for a long time. Dwight Long works at the Door of Faith Ministries, which is where I went in 2018. That's the rehabilitation center. And I was just kind of like putting out different inquiries and seeing who would be willing to help me participate in this project. So as I said, I did this project based on a project I did in 2018, which at that time was just called the Identity Project. Now I put a 2018 at the end because I did another series for my capstone that's labeled 2020. Basically, the point of that project was I wanted to focus on what individuals, how individuals identified themselves, basically, whether it's with just a name or with their circumstances that they find themselves in. And I kind of went into it with some expectations, and I have some examples here. The expectations that I had were kind of, I didn't know if people were going to want to participate. I was hoping to get 5 interviews at like a minute most, and I ended up with 14 interviews, and the longest one being 3 minutes long. These are 2 of the shorter ones, just to give a little bit of background context for the project as it turned out this year.
Okay, who am I? Right now, I'm a bunch of X's. I'm an ex-alcoholic, I'm an ex-drug addict, I'm an ex-liar, I'm an ex-thief. I'm looking for my positives now. And being here at the Door of Faith has renewed my faith in God. I've seen the Lord work in my life. Now My kids are coming around to see me. Family members respect my opinion. And a lot of people are proud of me that I'm here doing this. And I am too. Right now, that's who I am.
And then I also talked to a man named Ricky.
I come up here about six weeks ago, go through the program due to a little too much drinking, and so I drove up here, and I really like this place. It's got me back, got me sober, drug free, and also got me back in the Bible, where I needed to be. I've been on the run for about 10 years running from the Lord, and I finally stopped. And
yeah, so those just kind of go to serve as a little bit of background information for what the project looked like 2 years ago, because I pulled a lot of inspiration from that. So then we hit the second phase. It's supposed to begin right after phase one when we turn in our project brief. This is where you focus more on the design of the different elements and functional aspects of your presentation or your project. So for me, this would have been going to a location and filming different interviews and different amounts of B-roll. Development, again, is done through critique. This is when I got in contact from the Mary Greeley Medical Center with Alicia Kreibel, who works for the Israel Family Hospice House in Ames, Iowa. I also contacted a man named Jerry Van Cleve at the Polk County Prison System. He never got back to me, which was a shame because I was really looking forward to maybe collaborating with them. But I talked to Alicia for roughly a month, a little over maybe. And in that time, we set up, I met her in person, I met the staff, we set up different interview times. And I even met some of the patients that were staying at this hospice house. And the goal at that time was to do the same thing I did 2 years ago, where I would just ask the patient, who are you? And then take a step back and let them answer the question however they want to. Because that, to me, was the most interesting part of the 2018 version, was how they identified themselves with the situations that they found themselves in and the circumstances that got them there. And then just another important date, on March 5th, we had a capstone midterm presentation. And knowing what happened in the months after that, that's an interesting presentation, because what I told my class that I was going to do is not really at all how it ended up being, for various reasons. But in that midterm presentation, I included both the Polk County Jail option and the hospice house option, because at the time I was kind of holding out hope that I would hear back from the Polk County prison. But those were just the two viable options that I had for the project at that time. And seeing as it was phase two, it's all about the creation of your actual elements and your functioning elements. I thought it would be cool to do something I didn't do in 2018, which was try to make a soundtrack for this feature-length documentary that I was planning. I worked on it for about 2 weeks before kind of deciding that I should take a step back and focus more on the situation that I was quickly finding myself in, which was the coronavirus, obviously. It was spreading more and more. But during those 2 weeks, I really liked how this turned out, and I'm kind of upset that I couldn't find a place in the actual, or the final presentation. But this is a little sneak peek of what I was working on. This would have been played behind the interviews quietly, just to fill the neutral space. And then I had some more bass lines and some more percussion aspects near the end of this clip. We won't make it all the way through it. That would have been used to be played during B-roll to kind of move through that space. But this is a little sample of what I was working on. Clip is about 2.5 minutes long. We're not going to sit through the whole thing, but it was just supposed to be something light and palatable that I could play in the background. I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. It's something I've never done before, and I was using a program that I had relatively no experience with. So I think that was a good time, and I was happy that I got to include it in my capstone presentation in some form. So then we hit phase 3. Phase 3 should have been dedicated to the design and the creation of the actual physical space that we would use to present our capstone if we were to have the showcase at Hy-Vee Hall that we've been doing for the past couple of years. I was super excited about phase 3 is a substantial amount of its roadblocks. The Wednesday of spring break, March 19th, I got an email from the hospice center saying that due to the coronavirus outbreak, I would not be allowed back in the building, so I couldn't conduct my interviews. And that was rough because we made it so far and we had everything planned out. And all of a sudden I just had no client anymore. On March 23rd, all of the Iowa State classes were moved online, at least for the rest of the semester. Still, there's been no word about next semester, but I've heard a little bit that they might be planning on staying online. And then on March 26th, I conducted a series of Zoom interviews that I used for the revised capstone project, which became what I have now. And I'm really proud of the work that went into it and the quality of the work that came out of it. So then a brief comparison. At midterm, like I said, the two options I presented to my professor and to the class were a feature-length documentary focused on a series of interviews conducted at the Israel Family Hospice House in Ames, Iowa, or the same thing at the Polk County Prison, depending on how far I made it with both of those options. As of today, it's a set of case studies focused on a series of interviews conducted over Zoom with professionals from a wide variety of occupations. So I talked to people that work in different areas of expertise and wanted to know how the coronavirus has affected their work life and their home life, basically, because it's affected everyone, but not everyone is affected in the same way, which I thought was an interesting thing I wanted to look at. The medium I chose was a YouTube channel, and on that YouTube channel, I also included a playlist, like a look back playlist, as it says on the screen, that has all of the raw interviews that I took in 2018 as well. Again, just for background information about the project. So as the project looks right now, as of May 6th, it is uploaded in full to YouTube and is available for public viewing. The contents of the channel, there are 6 interview-based case studies in the playlist called the Identity Project 2020. There are 14 clips in the 2018 playlist, and those are the interviews that I conducted 2 years ago. There's a brief description written for both. And then also a means of contacting myself if anyone has any questions or anything. If you're watching it after this Zoom meeting or the YouTube Live. So here is a nice example of one of the interviews that I conducted with a woman named Suzanne Vogel, and then I'll kind of walk through the YouTube channel as well.
Oh, so how has this affected my work? Okay, so I think the answer I would say off the top of my head is completely and not at all.
Okay.
So let's start with the not at all. So a month ago, my job was to lead and love a congregation. It was to care for them in their joys and in their sadnesses. It was to point them to Jesus. It was to help leaders, both staff and non-staff leaders, learn how to disciple other people. It was to bring the Word of God to situations that I'm in ways that make sense to the moment.
Right.
Right. And so none of that has changed. And so that's why, in some ways, I think the church is still the church.
Right. Yeah.
But I would say it has profoundly changed the how.
So that's just an example of what the interviews looked like. That was, in terms of length, it was pretty average. We talked for a little over an hour, I think. And most of I think all of the interviews actually made it over an hour in terms of raw footage. I thought about posting those to the YouTube channel, but we had a fun experience trying to upload the short clips, just the 10-minute clips to YouTube. It was a fun 2.5 days of wondering how I was going to get it all up. So this is the YouTube channel. I'll go into detail about the logo in the next slide or the one after. But there's the 2020 playlist, which has all of the videos that I have up. The introduction is 22 minutes long. It's got an in-depth timeline of events in terms of the academic school year, the deadlines I set for myself for the project, as well as the CDC deadline or the CDC schedule that they released in terms of the pandemic. And it was really interesting to see how they kind of interacted with each other and how they intertwined with each other. And basically how every time something popped up on the CDC list, all of my due dates would move further back and the Iowa State schedule would change somehow. And then I have the 4 interview videos that I did. In those, I start off by introducing each participant and kind of introducing what they do for a living. And then I show a couple of clips of the interview, not the full interview, because again, I said each one was a little over an hour. But just the main parts of the interviews that I think were thought-provoking and things that would get people thinking and conversing about it. And then I have a conclusion, which again kind of recaps the whole series, and then also talks about what would have to happen if I were to make this project into a feature-length documentary, as I initially intended it to be. It kind of talks about how a lot of things would need to be different in terms of team members and gear and money. That's a pretty important deal if it were to be as big as I intended it to be. And then also on the YouTube channel, there's a 2018.
Okay.
Hold on. There's the 2018 playlist, which has all 14 of the interviews that I did at the Door of Faith Ministry. If you have time, absolutely check those out. Some of those stories, all of those stories, are just mind-blowing and beyond interesting. It's stuff that I can't even wrap my head around because I've never even come close to going through some of the situations that they've gone through. Very interesting stuff. So then back to the presentation, finishing touch. In the 2018 series, I didn't have a logo for the project because I wanted it to focus more on the participants and their answers and really not necessarily the design of the project. It was more about the content. So for this project, I saved creating a logo until the end, and I made that decision around spring break because I wanted the logo to appropriately reflect what the project actually ended up being rather than what I intended it to be, I guess. Because if I made it at the beginning, then you know, it wouldn't be the same because this project isn't exactly what I intended it to be. Again, I'm super proud of it, but I put a lot of thought into this. Yellow is an overwhelming and visually frustrating color by nature. And then green is rather cheerful and naturally soothing. And those two colors together are representative of the stories that the people that I interviewed told and the impact that this coronavirus has had on people's lives. And then the design of the concentric circles is representative of how, as I said earlier, everyone's been affected by this pandemic, but everyone's been affected in a different way. So if you can go through and watch the interviews and the clips that I took out of it, I interviewed a police officer and someone who works in the medical field and a pastor and the superintendent of schools. So everyone has different responsibilities and everyone was affected in some way or another. But it's all different. It's really interesting. So then a few takeaways. I kind of split it into technical and personal because I feel like I developed skills in a lot of different areas. Technically, I learned a lot of audio and video editing techniques and production techniques that I didn't know about before, but they were super helpful in increasing the production value of everything. Whether it was making the audio that I recorded using my relatively cheap USB microphone, there are different techniques you can do to make it sound like it's professionally recorded, and that helped a lot, I think. As well as professional platform practices. I didn't use Zoom all that much before this semester, but I've used it a lot now. So I learned a lot about, especially like screen sharing. There's actually a lot that goes into trying to get that correct so that your transitions look good and people aren't looking at things that you don't want them to look at or things that aren't your presentation. Personally, I learned a lot about problem solving under pressure. A lot of those roadblocks that we hit, it's easy to just kind of lose yourself and get frustrated right off the bat. But it's important to just kind of take a step back and know that, you know, we got to get past it, and you got to think smart, as well as interpersonal relationship skills, in terms of conducting an interview and making it, you know, pleasing to listen to and just easy and more conversational than anything. And then a lot about perseverance. So self-image, like videos, and my entire project revolved around me being in 6 videos talking about this project that I did. So that was something that I kind of had to get used to and kind of get over, as well as time management and constant progress, as in the soundtrack that I started working on. At that time, that was really good progress, despite the fact that it didn't make it into the final. So I do feel like I learned a lot during this process. And that's all I got. Thank you guys for listening.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. All right, really nice job. Nice job, Tyler. Nice job, Steven. All right, so Steven, if you want to hop back on with video. Yeah, 2 really great presentations of 2 very different projects, but like really well thought out and really well explained, both through the video documentation, but also through the presentation. So I'm going to go to the questions here quick. There's a couple in that came in from YouTube. So the first one here is it's for you, Steven. Dana says, "Wow, that was amazing," and wants to know, what kind of wood did you use and why did you choose that kind of wood?
Yeah, so that was some quick research that I had to make. Based on time, I was kind of forced to go off of something that was pre-made, just because I didn't necessarily have the utilities around me to like 100% make my own board of that size, because the final piece was, I think it was 19 by 24 inches. So walking around Menards with a face mask on, I found that was aspen that I used, and it was the closest cousin to like balsa or something like that. Like it was a softer wood, so it'd be easier to carve into, and that was just kind of luck of the draw that it took the ink really well too.
Nice. So then, Tyler, within your process, it sounded like you initially had to do like some relationship building with the individuals even before you got involved with the actual interview. Could you talk a little bit about that process and sort of how that started or where that came from?
Yeah, that was a pretty important aspect of both the 2018 project and the 2020 project, because in terms of like the Door of Faith, the place I went to in 2018, the contact that I had there was someone that I've known through my family for years and years and years. So it was just someone I had already met, and he was more than willing to help me with the project. This year, talking to Alicia at the hospice center, I had never met her before up until I reached out for the first time. And so I wanted it to, there's a lot that you have to get out front before you do a project like this, especially, you know, I was asking her to go in and interview hospice patients. That's not really something that people are just gonna be like, oh yeah, absolutely, just pick a day and come in and do it. You know, I had to make it clear that everything was revolving around respect for the families of the patients and the patients themselves, and it was purely to get their stories out and to get their stories heard. You know, I wasn't making any money off this project, so there's a level of relationship that you have to build with people and with clients. I think just in design in general, because you get to know each other better and you can kind of bounce ideas off of each other better, and it just helps the progression of the project, I think.
Nice. And with both projects, there's an element of process that's important in this, and some of this is maybe the nature of documentary filmmaking, but it seems like with each of your projects, you kind of had a starting point, but no clear endpoint necessarily, especially at the very beginning. So Steven, first, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, about, I don't know how, if you would frame it as like trusting the process, or if you would think about it in a particular way where like it's the matter of finding the material, maybe literally in your case, and then figuring out how to tell the story from that.
Yeah, and I mean, like even before that, I knew in general that I wanted to cover like the topic of a durable future. As far as like my capstone goes, like that's like I'm super interested just with like infrastructure and like travel and like just how all of it combines and interacts with our daily lives and how small changes to things can make, you know, bigger differences and stuff like that. And so for a while I had no idea what I was going to actually do, and that was the discussion that I had with you where, you know, it kind of made me realize that the best thing that I could do to like get my feelings out about this was just to be able to make something. Um, and so then that was like when I decided that I was just going to make something was kind of when I got a little bit more confidence. And that was like, I just decided I was going to trust the process. And that was like, you know, I was like, I knew I was going to print something and then I'm going to do stuff to the substrate that it's printed on. Wasn't really sure exactly what that was going to be. Like I could have made a cool carving design or something like that, but I just wanted to see what would have worked out the most with the wood as I was going. And so it ended up being, you know, kind of just adding like distress and damage to it, but the fact that, you know, it held up through everything that I was doing to it, you know, wailing on it with a hammer and chisel. So yeah, that was like just kind of trusting that with the process of everything, like there was going to be some good result was really kind of what I was, I guess, betting on. But yeah.
Yeah, and Tyler, I think your version of that maybe starts with that open-ended question from your 2018 version, where you asked people a very you know, sort of open question of you know, to identify themselves basically. You know, and just thinking about the importance of an open-ended question like that and what that sort of represents to our culture. You know, conversationally, it's very normal. I think in the U.S. especially, to introduce yourself and to then follow it up with, what do you do for a living, as if we all identify by our jobs or something, right? But you had a much more open question. And then like, how did that feel going into that? And you know, sort of, I don't know, some sort of lack of certainty potentially with what you were going to get back from it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a long time before I forget the feeling I had listening to the first example that I played in the presentation. He was the first guy that I interviewed when I first got to the Door of Faith and set up all my equipment. And so up until that point, I had this almost expectation that these are people that don't want to talk to me. These are people I'm going to say, the question is, who are you? And then I'm going to take a step back and he's going to say, you know, my name is, you know, James or whatever his name is. And then he would wait for the next question. And I was prepared for that because then I could form the rest of my project around, you know, I was expecting this and it's exactly what I got. And then his answer was, I don't even know his name to this day, but his answer was, you know, I'm an ex-alcoholic, I'm an ex-drug addict. Seeing the joy in his eyes when he said that his kids were coming around to see him and that his family was actually like respecting his opinion, that's something that I'm not going to forget for a long, long time. You know, it completely caught me off guard. And I think that this project especially, there's that process where the idea was relatively the same. Like I still wanted to see how people identified themselves in whatever situation they were in. But without a client, you know, that's really all I have. I don't have any idea what B-roll is going to look like or what the interviews are going to look like. You just kind of have to put yourself out there and hope that you can find someone who's willing to let you do something. And I was kind of worried because I was like, it's going to be hard to top the answers that I got in 2018 because those guys, even when the camera wasn't rolling, they would just sit and tell stories that you would not believe. And it's such an awesome memory, you know, and also a good project.
So then just as a quick follow-up question, because you've added the date to the titles, do you see this as something that you may continue in a different form, maybe in 2022 or?
Right. I think as of right now, I've got plenty of time to consider that question. It wasn't in 2018. I didn't add a date to the title because it wasn't something that I thought I was going to continue. I just thought it would make a really cool capstone presentation when I came into this semester. Yeah, I would like to do more of it just because both times it's been a roller coaster ride. You know, I started with this one idea and what I ended up with was something that you can't write this. The process of this entire semester has been a series of, I get everything built up to here, and then something comes and knocks me back down to here, and I have to figure out how to get back to where I was with no idea of where I'm at.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that the idea behind it will forever interest me, and it's something that I would love to do more of.
Yeah, that's really great. And also, like, movie titles never put one after the first one, but they often put two after the sequel.
Yeah,
right.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But also, like, a strength of being, a strength of design is being resilient within your process, because you never know what's going to go wrong. It could be anything from like some random color feedback from a client all the way to like catastrophic gear tech failure or the entire world shuts down. Like any sort of number of things can happen during the process. So it's really compelling to see how both of you responded to this situation, and like just the fact even that you chose to be in the group that showed up to this to present, I think is very commendable. And I know I'm speaking for faculty when I say that we're really proud of the work that you've done, and we're proud of you for being here and dealing with that. So that tower that you're talking about is a really valid, sort of valuable experience in a lot of different ways. It also speaks to a level of risk, because both of you did set up like a process that you kind of needed to trust to the end, in some kind of way. And in an interesting way that I didn't realize until we were sitting here talking, is that you both made documentary based projects. Like the panel is social design, right? Because you sort of want something to come from this and some sort of change in society. But in a way, like you've both approached it through the development of these very personal journeys that involve sort of other people or other processes, and then result in a documentary form. So my next question for the both of you, and I'll ask you first, Stephen, is what do you want like the takeaway to be from your process / project / documentary film for people?
I think like the main takeaway is just okay, let me restart. My main takeaway,
we can edit
the fact
that out.
Yeah. My main takeaway is the fact that I just want people to pay attention to what they're buying. That's like more or less that's it. Because little by little, those small purchases and stuff like that can end up having a huge impact. Yeah, that's honestly the biggest thing. Like, whether that impact then goes to like a craftsperson salary or something, if you're buying, some bespoke furniture or something like that, or if you're just, like I said, buying something that won't end up in a landfill 3 months later, like whichever direction that goes, but being more informed and knowledgeable during the buying process is probably the most that I hope for.
Yeah, that's really great. How about you, Tyler? What's a sort of primary takeaway you'd hope an audience would get out of your work?
I think on just a very broad scale, I think I talked about it in the interview that I did with Steve Bass, which is episode 5, I think, of the series that I did for the capstone. One of the takeaways from his interview was that he's the superintendent of schools for the Urbandale School District, and he would still go into the office every day because the people that work in his office with him were working from home. And he said, he gets emails, hundreds of emails every day, relatively asking the same question. He's like, people find an issue and they need someone to blame that isn't themselves, so they will find anybody to, just verbally tear down and cyberbully them into answering these questions. And he's like, it's hard, and no one ever sees it that way. And no one ever also takes the time to say, hey, I see what you're doing and I respect it and you're doing a good job. He says, you only ever hear the loudest noise is the criticism you get from people. You never really hear or notice the people who are giving you praise. And so I think the biggest takeaway that I can apply to the whole project is just to be kind to everybody. And it sounds cheesy and cliche, but I mean, I'm sure everyone has had that moment where you're getting off of the interstate or something, and there is someone standing in the grass next to you with a cardboard sign that says, God bless, anything helps. And it's just, I guess, our human nature to try to not make eye contact and just kind of continue the conversation with your passenger or something like that. But actually being able to sit down in 2018 with some of the guys, 90% of those guys have been homeless for a lot of their lives. And again, some of their stories are, they come from backgrounds of heavy drug abuse, heavy alcohol abuse, just physical abuse. They're people, you know, at the very base of it, they're people just like the rest of us. And I think that it's applicable to this project and to everyday life. Don't assume that you know what everyone's going through, and just be generally kind to everyone.
That's fantastic. So many good messages in that. That's really great. Thank you, Tyler. So two more quick things from the YouTube chat. One is from Professor Sherry. This one's for you, Stephen. It said there's a satisfaction of slow design that has the element of crafting and it's that satisfies. Film overlays remind her of Weingart's work in the dark room and the reference to process in his work. So big thumbs up there, and a really nice historical reference. And then also for both of you, Heather Purdy commented, these were such great presentations. And so Tyler, you referenced having done some work in her class. So she's in the YouTube giving both of you all kudos. And and Stephen, you screen printed in her class before as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, she really kind of kickstarted both of these projects just from her class when we were in there.
There you go.
The 2018 series was a final for her class.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Right.
So that's
there you
crazy.
go. So it's also the Heather Purdy panel. Great. All right. And then Dana commented, love that, Stephen, when you were talking about your ideas for buying less. Okay, so I have one last question for the both of you. Stephen, I want you to answer it first again. But because you both made documentary films and you're in this graphic design program, what advice do you have to somebody who's like a sophomore or a junior that might be interested in working in that as a format, knowing kind of what our current kind of trajectory is in terms of the graphic design classes and sort of the role that, I don't know, storytelling plays within video and the type of work that you've ended up doing?
I mean, as far as like, I am more or less a novice as far as working with film itself goes. Like, this is, I want to say my biggest film project that I've had while in school. And so I would probably say less to worry about specifically a type of making, and just, you know, if someone in the program is a maker, that's good enough as is, because I have so many hobbies and I've made so many things in this program in so many different ways that, like, yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about sometimes. Like, I just saw that they're doing a class soon about screen printing, which is awesome. I wish that was a thing when I, 2 years ago. But yeah, like, I just, as long as you're able to have that attitude of kind of using whatever method would work best for your project or your message that you want to work out. Because that was kind of what I was fighting with myself for this, where I was, thinking like, oh, I could make some, billboard designs and stuff like that about, how much it takes to ship stuff across the ocean, but that, wasn't going to get what I was actually trying to cover and get at. So
excellent. How about you, Tyler?
I would say kind of what we were talking about earlier, just trust the process and try. That's something that I've developed and learned over the past couple of years, is that if you have an idea for a project and you schedule out every step before it happens, as soon as the step, you could have an early step completely fall apart and then the entire project falls apart because you planned on everything going right. I think a lot of people had that encountered that in some way, shape, or form this semester especially. But I think start with a general idea and then start working towards that idea rather than setting a schedule and then just moving through the schedule. Because I think, if you're focused on telling a story and you're focused on building this narrative, some of the most interesting stories are the things that happen that you're not even ready for. That's A, it's really good content, and B, it's good to show the timeline of events as to how it happened. Yeah, just know what you want to do and know what you're comfortable doing, and stick with it. Because honestly, everything, I can't see myself as anything other than a graphic designer. And everyone that I have talked to, all the friends that I've made in the past 4 years would say the same thing. Find something that you're really good at and that you enjoy doing, and then just chase it down every time.
That's great. All right, cool. I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, I think you both are like really great examples of how graphic design is a dynamic and changing discipline, and
Absolutely.
has a lot of potential for people carving out carving their
Yeah.
own interests, and really being able to like find their place within within the field, because it is so dynamic and it's so changing. So thanks to everybody in the Zoom. Thank you to everybody who tuned in for this on YouTube Live. You can see Stephen and Tyler's capstone projects along with all the other capstone projects at isugd.com/2020 senior show. So go check those out. All the students are on there. They're all adding their work now. There's a really like amazing breadth of stuff happening in the department. Our next panel is tomorrow at noon, and it is a panel on branding. So tune in for that on the same YouTube channel. So thanks again for the comments, and thank you both, Stephen and Tyler, for hanging out. Let me chat with you about your projects. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed seeing their work. You should be really proud of the stuff that you've done, and I'm especially excited to see where you take these in the future. So thanks again, and take care.